Finding the courage to say goodbye to a loved one when they are in the process of dying is hard. But I can tell you that the grieving process, if you do not say goodbye, is a lot more difficult. And now I'd like to tell you what my dog taught me about saying goodbye. When my husband and I got married, he had this wonderful dog. Her name was Val, and she was part German Shepherd, part Dobie. And Val was full of life. She just loved going for walks, and she loved treats, and she loved Alex. And I wanted her to love me too, and I was not above bribery. So I took over treat time. Every night after dinner, I'd go into the utility room, I'd get the milk bone box, I'd rattle it, and she would come running, and I'd say, Val, want a treat? And she would jump up and down and up and down. She was just so excited. And I would give her her treat. Well, it didn't take her long to figure out that I was an easy mark, and so we might be watching television or eating dinner, and she'd come up and nudge my elbow with her nose until I would get up and give her a treat. It was fun. I enjoyed it. She enjoyed it. Didn't do anybody any harm. So for the next few years, we would take Val for a walk every day. We just loved her enthusiasm. And she loved being on walks, and everything that she discovered was just a joy. And she was a big joy in our lives. And then a few years later, she developed some kind of a digestive problem, and we took her to the vet, and he did all kinds of different medication and treatments. And finally he said, this is not a condition that she's going to recover from. So I think the kindest, most compassionate thing you can do is to put her down. So I'll never forget Alex kneeling on the floor next to her, petting her head and saying goodbye to her. And she was licking the tears off of his cheek. And then he stood up and he handed the leash to the vet tech, and she took her down the hall, and Alex and I went out to the car. We were about 6 blocks from the clinic, and it hit me. And I just said, oh, no, 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 no. And I started to cry, and I was like, no. And Alex said, what? What is the matter? And I said, a treat. I could have given her a treat, and I didn't do it. And I felt like my heart had just been pierced, that this was one thing that I could have done for her at the end of her life. More or less, really, I could have done it for myself. I wanted to give her that treat. That would have been the perfect way to say goodbye to her, and I didn't do it. And for months afterward, anytime I would see a big black dog with some rust coloring around the ears, I would think about Val, and I would just be so sad that I hadn't given her that treat. So now I'd like for you to fast forward with me a few more years. It's 2001. My mother's congestive heart failure has gotten worse. The cardiologist said that her heart was only operating at about 20%. And when I asked what that meant, he said, it means she's not going to live very long. So in December, she started having a series of little TIAs, and the doctor decided to put her into a nursing home for a few days for observation. It was just before Christmas, and they put her in a room with a dementia patient who was up all night hollering, help me, somebody help me, get me out of here, help me, somebody help me. Well, in the morning, while I was at the grocery store buying food for the thundering herd that was soon to arrive at our house, she called and she got Alex on the phone, and she was not happy. She wanted out of that place. She wanted out now. And she was really, really upset. When I got home, Alex said, your mom called. And I said, oh, what did she want? And he said, I think you need to buy an airplane ticket and go home. So I flew home the next day. And when I went to pick her up, I said, so, Mom, what do you want to do tonight? And she said, I'd like to go have a steak and a glass of wine. I said, all right. So I took her to McPherson's newest and fanciest restaurant, Applebee's. And we sat down at the table, and this darling young server came up. He had curly brown hair and really warm brown eyes. And he said, "So are you two ladies here celebrating a birthday or something?" And I said, "You know, we are. We are just celebrating life and the fact that we can be together." So we ordered our steaks and our wine, and we had a lovely conversation. And then when we finished eating, he came by and he set down this huge piece of chocolate cake on our table. And I said, "Oh, I don't think we ordered that." And he said, "You know what? It's my treat." And it just kind of took my breath away. I thought, "Oh, I think the universe is giving me a message here." So when we finished eating, we got in the car and I said, "Let's just drive around and look at the Christmas lights." And we did. And then I saw a house with a particularly beautiful display, and I pulled up in front of it and I stopped and I grabbed Mom's hand and I said, "You know, Mom, we might not see each other again." And she said, "I know." And I said, "I just need to tell you how much I love you and how much I appreciate the fact that you have always been on my side. You were always there when I needed you. You are the most amazing woman I've ever known, and I am going to miss you so very, very much." And we both cried. And then we talked about what her hopes were for life after death. And then we started laughing as we recalled a lot of the times that we had spent together, and how when I used to go home, we'd get the little kids in bed, get the men off to bed, and then she and I would grab blankets or sleeping bags, and we would go out and sit underneath the trees and just talk through the night. And it was such a special relationship, and she was such a wonderful woman. And that night we said goodbye. And it was a peaceful it was a peaceful parting, and it felt very complete. Although I did go back with Alex in January, she needed to have some help wrapping up her financial and legal affairs, and so we did that. And I talked to her on the phone every single night. And toward the end of February, I called my brother and I said, "I think we need to get Mom into assisted living." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because she's not sleeping and eating when she should be, which means she's not taking her medications when she needs to be. And I really think she needs to go into assisted living where she can have some help monitoring all of this." And he said, "Okay, when do you think we need to do it?" And I said, "Can you go tonight?" And he said, "Well, I can." So he packed, he drove to McPherson. It was about a 3-hour drive. And when he arrived at her apartment building, he couldn't get in. The doors were locked. So he tried to call her, phone was busy. The next morning, he went to her apartment building and walked in, and he looked around and he didn't see her. And then he peered into the bathroom, and the doctor said that she had had a massive heart attack and she was probably dead before she hit the floor. So I'll never forget standing there at her casket and looking down at her tiny little worn out body and feeling this profound sense of loss and grief, knowing that I would never, ever, ever go to my mailbox again and find one of her fat, fantastic letters. At the same time, I felt this sense of gratitude and relief that she had gotten out of this life with her dignity and her independence still firmly intact. And afterward, I I realized I was sad and I missed her, but I did not have any feeling of regret over what I had not done. I had not forgotten to give her the treat at the end of her life. And this was a gift to her, and it was her willingness to talk to me and to say goodbye was one of the greatest gifts she ever gave to me.